Good afternoon and thank you for being here. Everything's okay with the mic now? Okay, thank you for being here with us. We're going to talk about Europe and more specifically Eastern Europe. We're going to talk a little bit about Western Europe to know whether we can compare both systems, so to speak. And then talking about Eastern Europe, I mean, doesn't mean anything because it's not a uniform region. We don't mix German and Spanish, nor Spanish and Romanians. I mean, to reduce Eastern Europe to cyber security, it's not right. The the NATO Center for Cyber Defense is in Estonia, and the Cybersecurity Center is in Romania. We've got a lot of VIPs here explaining to us how it works in their country, how we can compare things. The conference will be done in English and in French. We're going to swap, and I'm going to let each one of our speakers to introduce themselves. Welcome everybody. My name is Pierre Herb.
Talk to me later. You can do it in French. So I'm coming from Estonia, from the RIA agency, which is Cybersecurity Center and ICT Authority together. I'm the international head of relations.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle.
Hi. My name is Olivia Blanchard. I come from France, but I work in Slovakia. I'm of the OSEC, GovSec, and I'm a researcher. I am Ina Duluc, director of the Inclusive, an association of experts in cybersecurity, and we're hosted in the... my name is Pascal Stacha from the House of Cybersecurity in Luxembourg, and I represent today the European Cybersecurity Center of Romania. I've got both hats, Eastern and Western Europe.
Je m'appelle
My name is Merol Mekre. I come from Estonia. I work in the e-Governance Academy et je dirige le programme de cybersécurité dans l'Europe de l'Est particulièrement, et je suis ravie d'être ici. On va...
Estonia first, and Piret, how your country build through history your now famous cyber resilience?
Thank you very much this question. I guess even you know the whole story maybe, but sometimes it's good to come back to the beginning. So I'm going just to tell you like a few minutes where we are coming from. So as you know, at the beginning of 90s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was nothing basically. We didn't have the old legacy systems, so the government had to figure out something. And as this time the government was very innovative minded and also very young, being very young in a reason that everybody who had a certain age, they had been part of the Communistic Party. Not that they really wanted, but they were obliged to. So, and during that time, at the 90s, the government was really young. The people who had not been part of this Red Party, so they really wanted to advance the country very fast. So they were courageous. They were brave, really, to take up the systems from the world what had just came out. They wanted to make it work because there was nothing. You had to do something. And they took the modern solutions what came to the market in the world as let's say the electronic ID card. It was one of the main things what was done that time, and even many people said that it was not good to do this kind of decision by the parliament to make it mandatory for everybody in 2002, but at the same time later it came out that it was a very good decision. That it was made mandatory. Even many people didn't take it at the beginning, There was no fines or nothing happened to the people who didn't take it. But very soon, when the digital services started developing, everybody understood how good tool it is, how much it makes life easier for everybody, that you don't need to go out to queue up or to make calls and to get the appointments in the government offices or in your local governments or anywhere. So you just get the things done online. You don't need to go up and to go out and to queue up in different offices or to try to take time from your working time. So everybody started developing digital services, and the people understood how easy it is. So this is more or less how it started, because there was no old legacy. They had to start the things from the scratch. And of course, on the top of that, cybersecurity was needed, because the digital systems have to be secure always. So that's why our CERT started working. CERT is Computer Emergency Response Team, or can be CSERT, or it can be like called a bit differently in some countries, but the meaning is the same, by the point that incident management, incident response. So they started in 2006 already. So that's why we survived very, very difficult cases in 2007. 2008 already the first cybersecurity strategy was adopted and started the implementation of that. Then there was a second strategy, the third strategy until 2018. There was a first Cybersecurity Act. And of course also the country has been adopting quite well all the European laws. There was NIS1 and all this outside legislation that came also, and at the same time we have been always very eager to learn from the others. Also here yesterday I came from Prague. We had a meeting with the colleagues from Czech Republic. They also, I guess, considered like the East. Even we don't need to make this separation in Europe really, because Europe is very, very small region compared to the world actually, and compared to all the other regions in the world. So I really think that if Europe stays united, and it should be more and more united in this world situation globally, if we think globally what's going on in the world, so we can only be stronger together. But yeah, the point what I wanted to make here, that I came from the other country again because we are eager to learn from the others. So of course we see from the reality that everybody's learning from their own mistakes or from their own bad cases what has happened. We know that there have been some bad cases happening in certain countries, and after that they start like flying in cybersecurity, because then they realize what they have to do, and then they really become very efficient and start changing the things. There have been like bad cases in US, bad cases like the hospital attacks in some countries, also in this country, in many countries. So then everybody is like really start doing, and these kind of cases are usually the wake-up calls for the governments as well. But as 2007 was for us somehow, but after that we have been really trying to learn from the others a lot as well. And yeah, maybe before I give it over, not to be too long, yeah, just maybe also to emphasize that for the size of the country as Estonia, it has been working very well up to now, the system that we have NCSC, National Cybersecurity Center, in the same agency with the ICT authority. So that one side is really developing e-government, maintaining and managing all the e-government components, core elements really, and the other side is responsible for ensuring all the cybersecurity in the country, on the whole country, so that they really know what each other is doing, and if there's an issue on other side, on one side, then the other side is immediately there, and so in our size of the country, it has been also working quite well, that really everybody knows what's going on, and everybody's involved, and there's a good cooperation and all these things. So thanks at the moment.
Thank you. We can understand that being striking early because 2000s are very early. If we look at the cyber history, we would say by Russia or even by Russian criminals, make you think way earlier than other countries on how to defend yourself, maybe.
Yes, yeah, it's working. As we had no choice, so everything is digital. When everything is digital, the security has to be guaranteed. And there have been many steps also taken. And also maybe what has been our strength from the beginning is that Estonia has been always implementing PPP, public-private partnership in cyber, also in cyber. Many countries are doing it, but not in this field. So, but in our case, also in our agency as National Cybersecurity Center and ICT Authority together, whatever we do, there's always a public procurement to get the best partner from the private sector, because we don't consider the country only public sector. The country is also private sector, so they have to be engaged. They have to feel this willing and responsibility being part of building up the country. And in the 90s, as it was, and also in 2000, it wouldn't have been possible to make quite a fast development without it, if it would have been only the government. And Estonia's governments have been always keeping public sector very small. So as few people in public sector, better it is, just to manage the most necessary. But they consider that the private sector can be more efficient, more knowledgeable sometimes, because for example, our private sector partners, the companies that we have now, they have other offices, headquarters in the other countries. So, and if they participate on the public procurements, they also bring additional knowledge from there. And we work with them to build up a new tool for the e-government or to build up another layer of security. So, which makes us a bit which we feel that we can manage whatever challenges we have. Of course, it's always difficult, and we try our best, and there are the cyber attacks. Like, yeah, last year, for example. Last year, as you might know, there is, in every year in April, there is NATO's biggest cybersecurity exercise, Locked Shield. Of course, last year in April, there were like enormous increase of DDoS attacks during that time. So, and we know where it's coming from our neighbor country, and it's not Latvia. So also in August, for example, when Parliament made a decision that it's like really the last time to remove some Soviet Union monuments from the city to the museum. So again, in the same day, our networks like crazy things were going on in our networks. And also in autumn, when the Parliament claimed our neighbor country as a terroristic regime, again, we had enormous attacks in our networks. So, but yeah, we have like learned and managed to manage it, let's say. It's coming from the life. More you have the same things, stronger you become, you learn to build up the resilience. You have no choice, as everything is digital anyway, so thanks.
Thanks, Piret. Very interesting thing you say, because we don't have to think as East and Western, since Europe is a very small continent. Merle, I don't know if you think the same, but you work a lot with other European countries, a lot of other foreign countries. Do you think we as a Western has to think more as a unit and less divide and more cooperate in cyber, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I would like to think I would like to say that we should think this way. However, I think it's reality that still Europe is divided into the eastern flank, or at least there is a lot of talk of the eastern flank and west, and that's okay. I would say that while on the first front, it might seem indeed that the eastern flank currently is a little bit more, has a more louder voice in talking about cyber. And there is some truth to it, because indeed the Central Eastern Europe, Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states, after the attack against Ukraine, perhaps immediately, very fastly reacted because of their own very personal memories of the Soviet occupation. Thereby, it was a fast reaction, very strong support to Ukraine. There's also been increase in, more generally speaking, of procurements and investments into the cyber and more generally into defense. And there's very, very strong support to Ukraine, to Ukraine's EU membership. But at the same time, I would say that I'm not entirely sure that it's right that the whole focus now is in the East. Because let's face it, the Europeans' hard powers in defense, in security, and in cybersecurity more generally still are dependent and linked with the economic powers, so that's France and Germany. When we talk of the latest cyber developments, then I think we should not ignore the United Kingdom that a couple of days ago published its new doctrine on offensive cyber, laying it out very clearly. I mean, I think UK really in its thinking and actions is very forward-leaning. And then the transatlantic link, the UK being very closely linked with the US Cyber Command. So more generally, I think there is importance for the like-minded countries to work closely together, because at the end of the day, be it the war in Ukraine or be it in various other divisions in the cyberspace that we are seeing, it is the like-minded nations against Russia, China, and Iran. But more generally, when we think of defense and security in Europe, I think it's important that we do not remain too independent on the America, looking ahead of the next presidential elections. Who knows who comes to the White House? And thereby, I think the Eastern Europe being very, very exclusively dependent on American forces needs to be balanced with Western Europe here that is claiming a bit more sovereignty, so that not to find ourselves hostages of another Trump era after the next American elections.
Even being close to Western Europe is not always easy, and we saw that every moment, every forum, when all of the countries, all of the 27 members are talking, we always have one or two that does not agree. Being a bit apart from the US is of course very logic, but how can we achieve being all agree in the 27 countries on one cyber defense?
Yes, indeed. I think it's a good question. For details are definitely to be followed. I refer to the opening speech of this forum, as I guess you do, of Thierry Breton, saying that there is a development of the EU shield, so hopefully details will follow. I agree, it's very difficult to find a common voice, all the more because we at EU are at very different maturity level. At the same time, to our credit, I'd say that the EU has done really incredible job in reaching some, or in raising the lowest common denominator by legislation, pieces of legislation such as the GDPR, but more importantly in cybersecurity, NIS Directive 1 and now the NIS Directive 2. When I travel around in the world, be it Eastern Partnership countries, they very much want to be NIS compliant. And there it is logical because countries like Ukraine and Moldova want to join EU, or Western Balkans, they are very determined they need to become NIS compliant. But then when I go to Central Asia or meet with countries in Latin America, even they, rather than inventing a wheel, want to follow the NIS directive, because it does make sense to follow a piece of legislation that helps you to increase the resilience of your critical information infrastructure rather than inventing a wheel. So here EU is very useful and very often does create a good golden standard. No, I think speaking in one voice is difficult, and but there are some good examples where EU can sort of like make sure that it's that the lowest common denominator is increased.
Does Central and Eastern Europe believe more in this EU regulation maybe sometimes than Western Europe?
I think I wouldn't in this sense make this division at all. Speaking from Estonia's perspective, I think it's important for us to work with all the significant cyber actors. As Piret was saying, there's very good and important cooperation, for example, with Czech Republic, where Estonians and Czech philosophies of cyber security being very important, receiving the political attention of the political leadership is there. But I think that appears to be the case also in France. I guess the audience has better experts on this, and we can, you know, there are more nuanced opinions on that. UK, as I said already, Netherlands. So for Estonia, it is important to work with significant actors in cybersecurity, either bilaterally or jointly, when it comes to joint attribution of some state-backed attacks, or joint fronts in be it UN or any other piece of fronts or platforms. So I wouldn't here make that cleavage, and it's rather like-mindedness that is very, very important in cyberspace. The fact that we believe that international law applies in cyberspace, and the question is how. And we jointly sort of understand how can we make that happen vis-a-vis Russia, China, Iran, and a number of countries that buy their approach.
Thank you, Mel. Olivia, maintenant sur la partie un peu plus économique.
Olivia, on the more economic part, if I may say so, I mean, we know that everybody has to invest in the cyber domain because it doesn't, though it doesn't generate money, but I mean, in the countries you work in or work with, I mean, do you see some kind of pragmatism as to this investment? I'm going to specify the countries I work with. We're talking in this roundtable about Central and Eastern Europe, but I focus on the Danube regions as defined by the European strategy for the Danube regions in 2010 by the European Commission. So it starts in the Bayern area, going through Odessa, Ukraine, going through Slovenia or Serbia. Now, in terms of investment over the last 2 decades, I mean, if we focus on the startups of the region, covering a large part of the central and eastern part of Europe, we can see a stable trend with a peak of the investments in cyber startups between 2005 and 2007. That we could associate with country joining like Romania, Slovakia, Czechia or Hungary. And between 2007 and 2009, we've got a new summit, a new peak in the cyber attacks, 180 million euros worth for 2008, and we could associate this to Russian cyber attacks Piret mentioned earlier on against Estonia in 2005, or the invasion of Georgia in 2008, because following those attacks, cybersecurity became a prime topic for public or private sector alike. We would need to add also that Slovakia and Bulgaria, for instance, are countries which are focused or targeted by disinformation campaigns from Russia and cyber attacks, but also following the Chinese intervention, namely in the Czech Republic. Between 2010 and 2015, we don't have a decisive trend, but from 2015, the investment in this region has rocketed up and continued growing until 2021 with a peak of 260,000 euros invested in the cyber companies, 373 startup and scale-up in the 14 countries of the Danube area, focusing on the funds regime now. They come from European countries, and they are also domestic ones generated by the region itself. And the United States are the biggest investors. Cyber has reached 68 billion worth for the startups in 2022. It's quite a big part, but if we compare that to the rest of Europe, it doesn't represent all that much. And if the cyber core of Europe, heart of Europe beats in the East, it beats in the heart of women, because amongst all the startups and scale-ups of the region who got some funds, I mean, they are all founded by men. It's good to mention that. I mean, if you walk around the forum, I mean, you realize that there are very few women involved. So cyber doesn't mean much. I mean, are there some sectors in cybersecurity which are encouraged?
Yes, there are a few topics that are seen as more important in the region: public security, cloud infrastructure, data protection, access security. But we especially have a priority in the region on IT security and antiviruses. We can think of the champions of antivirus that are in the region, for instance, Avast, which is from the Czech Republic, or AVG. We also have Bitdefender from Romania and ESET from Slovakia. However, it's not important enough for the region, because this Danube region is focalized more on more traditional industries, for instance, in transportation and energy, where we have many startups. Just to give you a few more numbers, when we look at the top 5 in the industry that have received most finance in the east of Europe, the leader industry is enterprise software. We can think of Grammarly or EPAM that are from Ukraine, that have received 80 billion euros in investment. And cybersecurity, it's only 5th in position in terms of investment. If we focus on the Danube region, it's completely something else, because the industry that receives the most of investment is, first of all, transportation, with 2 billion euros in 2022 in local startups, and then energy. And finally, cybersecurity, in terms of economic growth, only comes much later in this ranking. But there is an important development of technology and innovation in the region. In Slovakia, for example, as I was saying earlier, energy and transport sectors are in pole position, with a development especially of electric batteries. We can think of companies like Innobat that are really innovators in this sector and that are leading the way for Slovakia and entrepreneurs from other countries of Central and Eastern Europe. There is a capacity for innovation that is there, but needs to be shaken up a bit. And finally, I think that this will come changing the focus of the approach What is important to develop the cyber aspect in this region of the world is to open access to information. ESET, this Slovak leader of cybersecurity, will open by the end of 2027 a ESET campus of 77 square meters in the heart of Bratislava. And the idea is to train technicians in technology innovation and cybersecurity. And from there, really, I believe there will be a change in the trend in terms of investment and technological development. Thank you, Olivia. Lumina, I'm turning towards you. Olivia mentioned, perhaps we talked about champions, but more multinationals that were born in these countries that are training, that are employing. We also heard about Estonia that has an interesting system of cooperation between public and private. For us, we're a bit still sleeping with the cyber campus. Are there other companies that are investing? Should we look more at, on the Eastern Front to see what they're doing? From the point of view of companies in France, we can see that, yes, the cyber campus and the government is trying to put some means and finances and resources to give some momentum to it. But this already existed before. Perhaps we're too shy or modest to put forward or perhaps to show our pride in this level. But we can see some startups that are being put together. Some of them are being bought by foreign companies, which means that we really have jewels. So now we're trying to give ourselves the necessary resources and cooperation between companies to put projects and products together, as well as associations that have been implemented and set up in the French ecosystem. So we would really like to see what's happening in other countries, and these are cooperations at different levels, taking into account this increasing threat. The attack surface is becoming greater and greater, so we really have to work together. Working hand in hand is there. We obviously need more means, obviously. Also, we see that different cities and communities are being attacked, so they have to have the necessary resources to protect themselves. There's something definitely to be done and to be built. Perhaps we're still a bit shy. Obviously, the campus that is being deployed in different regions with the partnerships that have been announced during this FIC, well, this will obviously help us to develop the local ecosystem, because we don't just need multinational systems. There is one case that really talks to me, is this company called Framatome that has bought this foreign company in cybersecurity, and it's quite rare. They've also bought other companies, but we see development of specific business units that will be resold in other companies where it wasn't their core activity at the beginning. So yes, in front of the threat, we have to be creative, and this is taking shape through these campuses, through the CSERT arrival, with the cyber malware, malicious cyber, and companies that are able to respond on the small and medium companies that we should not forget. We're also lucky to have associations that are independent and autonomous, that are not just in the mainland of France, but also over in the overseas. So we're really lucky to have this this momentum and stop being too shy, and we have to not to be afraid to show our strengths. Yes, it's true. This cyber attacks are quite present in Europe. Perhaps in France, we don't have the same approach of other companies that they have elsewhere, that they grow very quickly beyond their borders. You're saying, would it be good to think about extending beyond? Are we perhaps too shy in showing what we're able to do and perhaps using our investment to go look elsewhere? I was just thinking of a company called Glimpse, which is in Bretagne, in Brittany, and that is opening up in Canada. So it's not to the east, but there is a willingness. Perhaps there's a new generation and new habits and new perceptions. Perhaps there is more opening, mobility. Perhaps the pandemic also helped people to change some of our habits. So perhaps people are thinking, I would like to live elsewhere, and it creates wishes and ambitions. So definitely there's the need to have new energy, and of course this will happen. And instead of being purchased, we're hoping to keep them and to give them the means to develop and to grow. And I think that's really important. On the training part, there's a historical effect of the Soviet Union bloc countries that have a cultural basis in terms of training at the university to turn towards math. We've had big brains in France, but they go abroad and to the US. In terms of cyber, shouldn't we think of a great plan in terms of making sure we don't lack manpower? I think training is really essential. We really have a lack of resources. I'm talking about people, because we have talents, yes, but especially we might stop young women who want to go into cybersecurity, because if we talk about talent, it means that we want people that have particular skills, and we might put brakes for ourselves. So the question is, when we're 18, do we feel strong enough to do this? I'm not sure of it. We also have a problem in terms of the scientific question. We won't talk about what happened in the previous years in France in terms of the scientific topics, but there have to be young women that go beyond, and we have to stop saying that cybersecurity is just a technical know-how. There are other panels in the IT, and we have to go in a much wider vision and give the opportunity to profiles that were not in this to go in that direction, because there's this richness, this wealth of vision, and those who are cyber malicious have really this range, and so we have to take whatever tools we have to go against this. So this mixture of different skills that are not just technical require a technical plan, initial and continuous, and to detect people with their skills and soft skills that could correspond to cybersecurity. This means it's not just training, but also human resource for the companies to understand that some profiles that were neither technical, neither in cybersecurity, but could completely respond to this because they have a certain level of performance, and intuitively they have this curiosity and appetite to understand and go around these problems and find ways to avoid them. So it's definitely something that we'll have to look into and stop saying that we need to raise awareness to people. We don't want to raise awareness, we want to strengthen them. So we have to go one step beyond, is to have prevention, training, and really need to have a direction. We do this for the firefighters, so we have to think of other approaches and take ownership of them. That sounds like our slogan here. Pascal, I'm turning towards you. You're the director of the European Center of Cybersecurity, which is in Romania. It's not a simple choice. Romania is a symbol, and I wanted to ask you why. So first of all, I'm not the director, but the chairperson. So it's not a 100% task. It's a side task that I'm doing. I am representing the governing bond of the center, the governing board of the center, which is the European Center. It's like a European agency. And in Europe, The objective is to decentralize and diversify the localization of the different centers of competency. So the choice of this competence center, European Competence Center in Romania, which was a choice between politics and strategy, because we can see that in the East, what we call East, and this was said several times, the percentage of people, or of youth rather, who are doing more technical studies, but also the percentage of women in these fields are more important than in our regions. And furthermore, our panel here is representative of this diversity, and I'm happy to be the only man in this panel today, which is really a strength of Europe. And the choice of Europe to want to diversify and decentralize the different agencies and to place them in different countries, to diversify the efforts, these are really key elements. This question of decentralization and diversification, these are the really essential elements of resilience, I would like to say. And we realize the importance and the need of resilience because we all have it on our agenda since the last crises and pandemics that we've lived, and we're still living in reality. So it's really this strength that's within Europe that is here. You also talked earlier about the fact that it is a challenge to find some consensus between the 27 countries, and yes, this strength of diversification is like a muscle. You have to train it, so you have to put effort in it. You need to have discussions, you need to have interactions in order to discuss about all these points of view and find consensus and future common strategies that will strengthen the common effort. And in cybersecurity, this is really the objective of the competency center in Bucharest, which is quite new and is just being activated. We're not 100% operational. Just to say a few words on this center, I think you all here know the European Agency of Cybersecurity, INCYBER, which is also in the east or in the southeast in Greece. And the ECCC, the European Cybersecurity Center, is really complementary to the INCYBER. The INCYBER, which is more active in the operational matters, coordinating with the member states in terms in cases of crisis or situation, to coordinate the efforts of different public agencies and accompany them in putting in place strategies for international cybersecurity, work on reinforcing critical infrastructures for the NIS, NIS2, also work of certification that was started by INCYBER with the new Cybersecurity Act implementation. With all of this, the ECCC is complementary because it will not look at operational aspects, it will look at the future. It will focus on development, research, innovation, and strengthening skills and capacities of the European market. So the focus of the center and the objective is to create what we can call technological autonomy. Here in France, we talk a lot about sovereignty. In the European texts, we read about this technological autonomy for cybersecurity. So this goes through research, as I said before, through academics, education, but also the social aspect, technology, industrialization, strengthening skills, in order to strengthen the competitiveness of Europe in cybersecurity. So that's the objective of ECCC. For this reason, it's important to consider this diversity that's present, all the strengths that we have, that we heard about, but also in France, but so many other places in Europe, we have champions. There are things being developed, but that are unfortunately not as visible. A few people that have this visibility, so the objective of the ECC is to increase visibility, to show that a company in France that needs more security can find it within France, but that if it can't find it in France, well, perhaps it's in another European country where it can find this expertise. Especially for us in Luxembourg, we can see very clearly that it's really important to create this European visibility because, Luxembourg is very small. There is a certain level of knowledge and skill of cybersecurity, so there's a market that's not so small, but we can see that companies that are looking for solutions, if they don't find it in Luxembourg, well, they go straight away towards the big names overseas, on the other side of the ocean. So they look for solutions that are non-European. And we really need to reinforce this visibility on the skills and expertise that exists in Europe, and this effort to enable more collaboration. And ECCC really plays an important role in this. If I understand, it's more the companies that will be targeted by this center, or perhaps between the people here at the table. Do you think that you will also talk with them on cooperation topics or a specific work in their countries? Well, yes and no. Obviously, there is a focalization on market development, anything that's market related. But in the ECCC regulation, we talk about community, cybersecurity community. So we have to define this. We have to define this community. We have to understand who are all these actors. The community itself is there. It's working. We don't have to create it. But we have to create this visibility to connect the different subgroups and clusters that were brought to life in different regions. For example, in France, we can see a strong community around Rennes in Brittany. In other regions, there is less cybersecurity. It's important to create this visibility, to show that this offer exists, and to open it up to all the actors. So we have to create a visibility on this community, which includes companies, service providers, but also all the research institutes, the training centers, and obviously users and companies which have needs where they want to strengthen their cybersecurity according to their needs and define strategies of innovation and research. And also, we have to talk about structures and organizations that are perhaps more in the field of ethics. Because when we talk about security, cybersecurity, we all know the classifications between black hat and white hat and gray hat, and all takes place at a certain level of ethics. because my skills and my knowledge to be able to see behind the screen and find vulnerabilities, look at the system, am I gonna use it for the good guys or the bad guys? So these are choices at some stage in the life of a person. So there are a lot of efforts to try and direct our youth to go in the direction of a career and not to fall in a space of crime. There has been a lot of effort in Europe already in this field. I remember some regions where there were many efforts like this, but again, there is perhaps more cooperation to be done with other countries at a wider level to strengthen this activity. I just wanted to add one last thing. So I spoke about the community, the European Center. Between the two, there's also the network of national centers. It's not just the European Center. Everything will not be centralized in Bucharest. That will be decided and done there, not at all. The idea is that in each country, there will be an NCC, a National Coordination Center, which is a national center that will be directly in touch with the European Center and that will focus on the local community, that will be close to the community, and that will really be able to communicate and enable and allow local actors to benefit from European funds that are managed by the European Center. Because the European Center will manage all the funds, whether it's research, innovation, development, deployment, at the European level for cybersecurity. This is at least for the next 5 years. So we're talking about 5 billion euros, so it's a big number. And I heard some examples where the investments are not yet at a certain level and they're coming from abroad. And I think it's also linked to the lack of visibility and access, ease of access to this kind of funds, European funds, which are, it's true, they are complex, and a small company will not always go in that direction because there are many formalities and paperwork. And this is where the national centers will play a very important role, because they're there to accompany small structures and national structures and local structures to be able to benefit from these funds and to also reinforce within their regions, in their countries and locally, cybersecurity. Thank you, Pascal. It's an ambition. We have a few more minutes. Are there one or two people who have questions here?
Il y a 5 questions dans la question.
There are 5 questions in this question. Perhaps an element of response within the brand new program that's called Digital Europe program, which is not really about research but more about implementation. There is an article, Article 12, paragraph 5, which specifies that funds for this program are only for the advantage of companies coming from Europe. So there is an element here that is trying to strengthen the local actors and allow them to be less dependent on external funds. A second project, which is not yet a reality, but is going in this direction, is the European Investment Bank. They announced end of last year that they have done a study and they're thinking about starting a fund of funds. To say it simply, they will put 2 billion euros available for investment funds for cybersecurity to to simplify creation of private funds. So if there's a private actor who wants to put 10 or 20 or 50 million on the table, they will equal that, they will match that. And they take this from a fund of funds. So these are two examples of actions that are going in the direction of your question.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. It was very interesting. I learned a lot from all of you, and thank you everyone. Bye.